Welcome to the official Tennis.com podcast featuring professional coach and community leader, Kamau Murray.
Welcome to the Tennis.com podcast. This is the podcast number 1 of 2023. And we're getting ready for the Australian Open. And we've got a guest who probably is one of the best guests to kick us off for the Australian Open, Johan Kriek, 1981 and 82 Australian Open champion. Back when the Australian Open was on grass, right? A legend from South Africa, one of the great guys on the tour, wins over Johnny McEnroe, dad to 2 rising stars. Johan, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Kamau. Nice to meet you.
So it's Australian Open time. And, you know, back in the day, people didn't want to make the trek all the way to Australia. So tell me what that was like in 81, 82 when you won, back when it was on grass. I mean, I don't even know if most people in my era remember the day. I was born in 80. I don't think I ever knew the Australian Open was ever a grass court event. Tell me about those times.
Yeah, it was it was a golden era of tennis with the Connors, Borg, McEnroe, Ash, and Nastase era. I mean, I played with basically almost 4 generations of players, 4 different types of rackets. I played with white balls at Wimbledon, then I switched it to yellow balls in 84. I mean, we played so many things. What people don't realize is back in the 70s that 3 of the majors were played on grass.
Mm.
You had the Australian Open, and you had Wimbledon, and you had the US Open on grass at Forest Hill.
Yeah.
And the only one was on clay. There was nothing on hard courts. Now you have, obviously Roland Garros is on red clay, and you got Wimbledon that's still grass, but then you have the Australian and the US Open on hard court. So it's changed quite a bit. I mean, it's, when I played in the late 70s, early 80s, most of my career was in the 80s, successfully. The Australian Open was always the last tournament of the year, and it didn't have the cachet, didn't have the prize money or any of that stuff. Even though it was a major, so to speak, on paper, it didn't have the financial workings like you have with the US Open or Wimbledon or even the French Open. So it was a very different era for the Masters, and then for the major tournaments. So. But I went down there, and my first 2 times I didn't qualify. I was already on the tour, obviously, in 81, 82. I was already top 10 in the world. But I played very well, and just played Steve Denton in the finals twice and beat him in both finals. The first year was a 7-6, and the fourth was a tough one. And then the second year I played him in straight sets. It was a little bit easier, but it was a great sight and a really good run for me.
Now, when did that change? Because right now, I see the Australian Open as probably the most forward of the slams. They were like the first ones to have the LED boards all around the bowl of the court. And the players initially thought it was annoying because you serve a ball, you hit the LED board before the ball kid gets a hand on it, and the ball bounces back in the court. Now the LED board is used to create more advertising, right? To create more sort of digital and imagery and color to the court, and so to modernize it. And even Australian Open is probably one of the first to publicly advertise prize money increase. I mean, very public about 3% increase from last year. You know what I mean? So when did that sort of shift, where it was sort of the last tour of the year to now being the first tour of the year and being
very interesting. I mean, the old the old US Australian Open was played at Kooyong, which is the very famous old Rod Laver, Ken Rosewall era tournament that was played there, right on the Yarra River. It's not that far from where it is today.
Yeah,
the new site, but it was an old club, and to make room for the new and improved version, they had to switch sites. So they went to Flinders Park, and then I think the Australian Open switched in '86, maybe. I was starting to have some issues with my elbow, and I was injured a little bit, so I played there against Edberg, lost to him. And I think he won it that year, but nevertheless, and I think 86, 87, they changed it over to hard courts and the new facility. And obviously over the last number of years, couple of decades, they've really, improved that site and improved the tournament. And, rightfully so, the Australian Open has become an iconic Grand Slam event. And I just think it's really probably the most fun one, because it's obviously played in a very fun city of Melbourne, very much a European feeling city, and trams and all that stuff. I always had a great time in Australia, played very well there over the years. It was a great era to see it improve like that. But it's a fantastic tournament now. Very proud to see that a South African runs it for the last number of years. Kriek out of Champaign, Illinois. He was the coach there in college. He was working with Kevin Anderson, also from South Africa. I guess he recruited him. Yeah. So Kriek has done a magnificent job for the state of Victoria, and he's an iconic tennis operator.
Oh, 100%. So I'm from Chicago. So Kriek Tiley is an Illinois legend, right? Coaching there at U of I. Brought Kevin Anderson over, and Kevin Anderson, we know, got to the 2017 U.S. Open final. Same year Sloan won the U.S. Open that year, so that was a great run. And Kriek, and I mean, from the per diem, from the food, from the salon at the place, I mean, it just is a first-class event. So
it's kind of funny, I don't know if people really recognize it, and I don't want to digress from this subject matter, but I'm kind of proud of the South Africans that have done a major job on tennis since the 60s. Let me give you an example. Kriek Tiley is the modern day guru for Grand Slam events, and has obviously built up a fantastic tournament with the Australian Open. But there was another gentleman by the name of Owen Williams, who was South African born. He was a pro player in the 60s. He's now probably deep into his 80s. I used to have, when I played the South African Open back in the early 80s and 80s, it was a difficult time because it was apartheid era. I was blackballed, blah, blah, blah. But, I tried to support South African tennis. And I ended up winning the tournament in 1983 when Owen Williams was a tournament director in Johannesburg. What people don't realize is that the South African Open was the 5th oldest tournament in the world after the 4 majors. And so when South Africa switched governments in 93, within a couple of years, the South African Open had completely disappeared. The whole South African Tennis Union was run into the ground, was bankrupt. And so in order to pay off the bills in South Africa, they sold the date to a tournament in Barcelona. I think it was Madrid. And so Owen Williams ran the South African Open from the early 60s. And by the late 60s, he decided that there may be a different way to make these tournaments more successful, more viable, more prize money. And Owen is the grandfather or the founder of the sponsor tent and the box seats around center courts. He was the original guy that started it, South African. And so by the late 60s, the Forest Hills USTA folks said, there's some guy down in South Africa who's doing an amazing job at taking a big tournament and making it extremely successful financially. And we need to talk to this guy. And so if you want to read about this era of the box seats and the sponsor tents and how professional tennis is where it is today, there's a couple of people that are very key players. One is Lamar Hunt, that will never get the accolades that he deserves, from Dallas, Texas, who started WCT Tour, as well as this guy, Owen Williams, who was a South African businessman, former tennis pro, who has a very keen sense of how to make money with tennis. And he started the box seats. So the USDA hired him to run Forest Hills at the US Open, at Forest Hills and at Flushing Meadows. So I don't think he was there at Flushing Meadows, but he was at Forest Hills for about 4 or 5 years, then went back to South Africa. And that's why the US Open is today one of the richest tournaments, not because of just him, but just these ideas have been flourished and, become bigger and bigger and now everybody around the world. I mean, if you don't have sponsors with box seats and sponsor tents and dinners and lunches and sponsor parties and all that stuff, we would not see the increases in prize money. Yeah. So he was really kind of the founder of bringing big corporations to tennis. Interesting story. He wrote a book called Ahead of the Game. You should read it. Fascinating.
Yeah. And another famous South African, Ilana Kloss.
Yeah. Ilana's in Chicago.
Yeah, Ilana's Chicago. New York's been split time Chicago, New York, but spouse to Billy. But another good tennis mind, soft-spoken, but a shark inside, right? Great business person, the force behind Billy and keeps Billy working, keeps the sponsorship coming. Well, you're right. I mean, South Africans have had a big influence on tennis.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue. I have some interesting plans, and I'm pretty instinctive about what I've done all my life in tennis. I come from a farming community of 500 people, and we have 2 cement courts in that town, and that's how I learned to play tennis. And was discovered when I was 10, like, this kid is not just going to be a great rugby player, but he should really play tennis because he's talented. So that's how I got to be a boarding school student in Pretoria, in the Afrikaans Boys High School, which is the Afrikaans school. But Elon Musk went to the school on the other side of the street. So kind of an interesting tidbit. But Africa has been left in the dust for too many decades.
Yes.
And I have some ideas how to get things going again.
Yeah.
So I'm on a war path to get tennis back in Africa and really make a difference for the legacy of junior tennis and just basic tennis tournaments. There are no ATP or WTA pro tournaments south of the Sahara Desert. That leaves 1.1 billion people without that opportunity, like I had, to go and watch the South African Open and meet Bjorn Borg when he was 16 and a half years old, coming out to play his first pro tournaments. He went to South Africa. I was in high school. I was 13 and a half years old, and I was invited to go and watch the tournament. Arthur Ashe was there, Jimmy Connors, all these guys. And I just knew at age 13 and a half, that's what I was going to do. So it's really it's a sad state of affairs that things have, over the decades, been neglected, and Africa has been left to fend for itself in whatever tournaments and junior events they could run up. But we really truly need some new ideas and some new blood to come in there and pump tennis in a continent that has been neglected, unfortunately.
Yeah, and when you think about African tennis now, all we hear about is people leaving. We hear Africans going to France, going to Spain, right? Just sort of being extracted, right?
Yeah.
Being told that you can't develop in the continent. You got to go elsewhere to get good, right? And then what happens is, they lose their heritage. They spend so much time in France or Paris or whatever. Then the coaches take them and, make them seem like they discovered them, right? You know what I mean? And not give any credit to how good they were before you took them out of their native land.
I would love to change that. I think we have the opportunity, especially in South Africa and maybe broader spectrum Southern Africa, and start building on a platform by which we think we can get some very powerful people behind us to make this happen. Bring professional tournaments back, just like we had in South Africa back in the day. It was the 5th oldest tournament in the world, started in the late 1800s, and really revive it and do something so unbelievable that the rest of the world is going to look at us and go, wow, we didn't know that Africa could do this. And I've lived most of my adult life in America. I'm a South African at heart. I've been a U.S. citizen since 1982. But I think myself and some very interesting people are very, very, very serious about this effort, and that goes to the highest level of both men and women tennis.
Mm-hmm. And I say the same thing. Like in Chicago, we try to take a cradle to grave approach. If you cannot, people want to play basketball because they can buy a ticket to a Bulls game.
Right.
But if you cannot get close to pro tennis, you never believe that you can do it. Right. You never fall in love with it. You know what I mean? And so,
absolutely.
I meet so many people on tour that were ball kids for Roger Federer, right? Or a ball kid for somebody else. And it's like a lot of careers just start with that, just have an opportunity to be a ball kid or to play on a court next to a professional like they do in Czech Republic, right? And, in America, South Africa, you gotta, keep these tournaments alive so that kids sort of see it to be it. So we're trying to do the same thing in Chicago.
Yeah, no, South Africa has got great tennis programming for juniors. They have academies there. They got ITF tournaments. There's a ton of ITF stuff in Southern Africa. The problem is once the kids get to 15, 16 years old, they have to leave. They have to go to Europe. They have to go to America. They got to be exposed to that higher echelon. It's a very different time now than when I was even a young junior and upcoming. I was just absolutely unbelievably fortunate that my my foundation coach in Pretoria was this guy, Ian Cunningham. He's now passed away some years ago, but Ian took me under his wing, and he became sort of my second dad. You know, I was in high school, I was in boarding school. There was no such thing as a online school. You know, that you can do things and you play your sport and you can do your education. There's nothing like that. It was like either you do your education in sports secondary, right?
Right.
But I just went to the schoolmaster one day and I said, at 17, I said, I'm not going to finish my final year in high school. I'm going to go play professional tennis. The guy looked at me in stunned disbelief and said, can you make even money out of that? And I just didn't know what to say because I've never been on a tour, so I didn't know how much money the guys would make.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm going to try, I guess, you know. And he says, your parents would like for you to go? I said, yeah, they okay. They would like. So my coach had emigrated to Austria, of all places. Cold place. And I left the heat of summer in February of 76. And I ended up flying to Zurich, Switzerland. They picked me up. And I lived in Austria for 3 years. Luckily, just plain blind luck. My coach had got a job there from South Africa to immigrate to Austria, got a job at a club. And I learned to play on red clay. And that's really how my lucky stars turned out to be, you know, a very, very fortunate situation because I could now play on red clay, and I played indoors, and I got to play tournaments in France and England and Germany, and, you know, just traveled around by train a lot.
So easy once you're in Europe to compete in tournaments everywhere.
That's why there's so many good players out of Europe, I think. It's because the countries are so close together. So the competition is amazing.
Yeah.
The opportunities there are way, way more conducive to have a bunch of people play well because it's easy travel, it's close enough, tons of tournaments, tons of different. I love the way the French actually go about their program because it's sort of more of a don't stifle the talent, you know, so that you see the French, they play very different from the Spanish, right? The Spanish are all pretty much the same. It's kind of like you got to get the mold from from Nadal, right?
Right.
Whereas the French are very rainbowish, you know. They let people kind of develop in their own way, and the coaches are very well supported. They got a great system in France, I think, and you know, but they've had over the years tremendous amount of players coming out of France as well.
Oh yeah, France, Italy now is coming along. It's just amazing. So what I find ironic is that you trained a lot on clay in Austria.
Yeah.
So why did you not play the French Open from 1980 to 1985?
You know, that's a very good question. I
mean, you played all three slams except that one.
I just, you know, the first time I played on clay I was 17 years old. And so I just didn't feel the push. I just didn't feel that comfortable on it. And so I didn't play the French until 1986. I decided, okay, you know, my then wife wanted to go shopping in Paris, and I haven't been to Paris. And there was a big joke in Le Figaro or something because I did so well. I got to the semis. I said, you know what? My wife's going to go shopping, and she wants to see Paris. And we did the whole 9 yards, the Eiffel Tower. We did all that. And I said, you know what? People think I can't play in this.
You're running from it. They think you're doing the Roger Federer, right? Where you like take a little vacation, start your grass court season early. I mean, you know, like I was looking at your record, like, what is the deal? You play all four slams, found late in all of them, or played the other three. Not like you were injured, right? It was like you just chose not to play the French, like Roger.
Well, back then it was just sort of weird. It's just like I didn't feel like I could stay in Europe that long, even though at that time I was living in Florida already. I lived in Naples, which is funny. I'm here in Naples today. So I just, you know, I was one of those players, you know, when I give it my all, I play 3-4 weeks in a row. I couldn't play, you know, maybe Hamburg or then warm up for or Rome and then go to the French and then have a week off practice. It was just for me too long in Europe. I just got brain dead. So I said, you know what, I got to come back and prepare because I had already done so well on grass. And I think that I need to prepare for the grass court season. I did fairly well at Wimbledon. I got to the quarters twice and a couple of 16s, but I never really I felt like the weather and Wimbledon really affected my tennis too much. One day it rains and, you know, my final year is 1993. I qualified, I think 16 years apart. For the first time I played Wimbledon, I qualified, and then I qualified when I was injured. I had 3 surgeries. I was coming back. I was 36 years old. I qualified and lost to Javier Sanchez in the first round of Wimbledon. I played 5 days on one match. I mean, it was just ridiculous. The weather just wrecked us. But yeah, I mean, and then in '86, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to really give it a shot. I'm going to really try very hard at the French. I practiced really hard in Florida in the summer in early May, and went to the French Open, and I played free. I had no expectations. Nobody thought I was going to do well, and I beat some good players on clay. Including Vilas on center court in the quarters. And I beat him 3-6, 7-6, 7-6, 7-6, 4 hours, 48 minutes. And I was dead. I mean, I had to play Lendl 2 days later. I couldn't even get out of bed. Honestly, they looked at me and they go, I think you should just default. I said, nobody defaults in the semis of a slam.
Are you kidding me? No.
You know, I mean,
no way.
If you can crawl on the court, you play. But it's so funny that 2 days before I played Vilas, it was super hot. It was like in the 90s in France. It was ridiculous. And I love the heat, so I played well. And then I had like a day off. I literally I stayed in bed. I was dead. I was completely spent. But I had a bunch of 5-set matches before that as well. So it wasn't just that one match. But then I played Lendl, and it was 50 degrees. It was so cold. It was the first time ever, and it was windy and snotty rain, a little bit of rain, and they made us play. And it was so cold that the tournament, for the first time in the history of the Grand Slams, they allowed us to play with a full tracksuit on. So I played. I mean, I just couldn't play. I was just dead. So Lendl had a basic, easy 3-set walkover, and then he beat Bernfors in the finals.
Now, you were there during that golden era, and I remember back in 1984, 1982, John McEnroe went 81-4. Now, I know you got some wins over Johnny Mac. What was that year like? We almost saw a year like that last year with Iga Swiatek, right? Where she just was on a run, right? I don't know if she won, 34, 35 matches in a row or something like that. But what was that year like with Johnny Mac on that run, only losing 4 matches?
I mean, you know, obviously, John was a very, very talented, unusually talented player that came into an era where there were some really tough players, and the guys were incredibly vivid characters, not just on the tennis court, but just the way that they are as people, you know. And when I played Mac in '82, I played him a couple of times. In '82, I beat him in the finals of Memphis in the U.S. National Indoor Championships, which was kind of funny because I had just won. I think early January, I won my '82 Australian Open, and these guys were not there. So the newspapers were like, oh, well, Kriek is coming to Memphis, and McEnroe is going to be there, Connor's is going to be there. I don't think he's in the same league as these guys. And I just sort of like used that as a bit of fuel. And I got to play John McEnroe in the finals in '82 in Memphis, and really great TV match. And I beat him 6-4 in a third. And I was really playing good tennis. And I thought, you know, I've arrived. I mean, I can play with these guys anytime I want. You know, it's just a matter of how you conduct yourself and how you practice and how you feel how you get on the court with them. And, you know, so I got him a couple of other times in San Francisco. I played some really great matches. I pretty much beat John mostly on indoor forest carpet, which is funny. That's kind of his best surface. But I always felt like his best surface was Wimbledon, because that lefty swing serve back in those days was so low and so quick, and it's so hard to pass him, you know, with his serve and volley tactic stuff. He was nearly unbeatable at some of these tournaments, and he obviously showed in '84 that he was at the absolute prime of his career. But you know, in tennis, maybe more so back then than maybe today. There's certain the styles of tennis back in the day was a little bit more serve and volley, some guys, more grinder, some guys. But today, everybody serves big, everybody grinds big, with very little opportunistic volleys, and there's no real serve and volley tactics. So it's more like, let me serve and volley because I'm up 5-1, 40 love, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a little different, but yeah, Mac was an amazing talent, and you know, Lendl came through, and Connors was there, and Borg was there, and then you got the younger cater coming in with Boris Becker and Mats Wilander and Stefan Edberg, and then later on you got Agassi and Sampras, and then I missed Sampras by one day. I played Agassi a bunch of times, beat him a few times, but missed Sampras by a day, and played a lot of guys. I even played against Ken Rosewall in doubles one time in Sydney, Australia. This guy was 44 years old. We almost lost to him. Amazing guy, amazing player. So yeah, I had a very, very interesting career. Very fortunate.
Now you play a tournament in Chicago. I'm trying to sort of make tennis more exciting in Chicago. It's a cold weather climate. People really don't know about the rich tennis history in Chicago. You beat one of the all-time great personalities in Chicago, Yannick Noah.
Yeah.
Where did you all play the event?
It was indoors. I thought was it called the Rosemont Arena or something?
Oh, Rosemont. Yes, Rosemont Horizon.
Yeah, Rosemont Horizon. Exactly. I think we played there. I may be wrong, but I think we played there. But this is a really interesting story. So first of all, my history with Yannick Noah is quite interesting because in 1978 or 79, I think I got to go back in the archives and look. My brain is a bit foggy, but I beat Yannick at the US Open 6-4 in the fifth. So here's a white South African playing a black guy from Cameroon, and we're both from Africa, and apartheid South Africa, and people made a big deal out of it. Yeah, we were just athletes. We were just out there freaking busting our ass. I got lucky. I beat him 6-4 in the fifth. So Yannick and I have been friends for a long time. I mean, we were sponsored by the same Lecoq Sportif company. I had a lot of French companies that I was playing for, including Rossignol Rackets, Lecoq Sportif. Lots of Peugeot was a sponsor for me, a car company. So I've had a long relationship with Yannick. He beat me a few times. I beat him a few times. And then we got to Chicago, and, it's a big tournament back then, like a Masters 1000 essentially back then. And Connors plays McEnroe in the finals, and Saturday night, Yannick Noah and I just decided to, let's play a little doubles together. I've never played doubles with him before. Okay. So I said, Yannick, you want to play doubles? He says, yeah, sure, I'll play doubles. And we get to the finals, and we got to play Flax Seguso, #1 doubles team in the world. Me and Yannick, Yannick is a superb athlete, and I'm pretty good. I jump around, I can volley like crazy, and he's athletic as hell. So we kind of gelled a little bit, The first few matches were kind of rough. We beat a bunch of guys. And then we got to the finals. But so Connors has to play McEnroe in the finals. And I think Connors got the flu, and he can't play at all. Completely in bed. He can't move. And so the tournament director is up in arms. He's got 2.5 hours of television. He's got a decent double setup, with these 4 guys. So he comes up to, he calls us. He says, guys, can I meet with you guys in the hotel? So he came, he says, listen, Connor's definitely ill. He can't move. McEnroe has to walk over. I got 2.5 hours of television. What do you guys think? Do you mind playing a 5-set final? And we said, sure, no problem. He says, I'll throw some extra money in or something. Everybody had extra $5,000 or something. We said, hey, that's fine. That's great. So Yannick and I start playing, and I mean, Flax Seguso is right away in their groove. And, they're #1 doubles team in the world at the time. They've won Wimbledon, they won US Open. Here comes Yannick Noah and I, like pickup partners, like off to Central Park in New York. And we get smashed the first 2 sets. And suddenly we started to play. And we ended up beating them in 5 sets. Exactly 2.5 hours in doubles. The tournament director was so happy. It was an unbelievable match. I mean, we basically saved the tournament because it was such fun. I mean, we were running into the stands and high-fiving people, and Yannick is diving and he's jumping like a grasshopper over people and hitting overheads from the side. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was really fun. So I remember that vividly, that it was one of those sort of off-the-cuff moments in tennis that you didn't expect, and then it turns into something spectacular.
Oh, man. Well, it's funny you talk about saving the tournament, because when I think of like U.S. tennis, similar to sort of the question with South Africa, you mentioned you mentioned Memphis, right? That event is gone. Chicago, that event is gone. Los Angeles had an event, right? Tampa, you know what I mean? Like all of these events that were just such good, prominent stops on the tour, and now are gone. What do you think we have to do? Because you talked about the European advantage, really. Once you go to Europe, you can train from, you take a train to Austria, to Strasbourg, to Paris, to, everywhere else you can just get around, right? And you can play every single week, good tennis. Even their team tennis over the years. A lot of people don't know. A lot of the French players play this team tennis and make money.
Yeah, I played team tennis in Austria. It was fantastic.
You know what I mean? With like full of pros. It's like, what do you think we have to do where we can create a pipeline? Now that you're sort of U.S. citizen now, right? Create a pipeline where the U.S. players can play every week, get around affordably, have tournaments, stay multi-years instead of, 1 year deal, 1 year leases on sanctions, right? Because that's why I think we see Italy now pop up with Sinner and Musetti and, Berrettini, right? In Paris, same thing. I mean, or France, I mean, same thing. It's like we're just losing at the lower level where there's the 80K, the 100K, the 125s, and travel and cost in America when we are the richest nation, right? And we should be able to make this work.
Right. I think there's three things. I think the size of America is a detriment in a way.
It's big.
It's not Europe. Europe, you jump in Holland and you're in Belgium. Right? America, you drive 8 hours in the car, you still haven't left Florida. I mean, so I think geographically, I think America is a little bit different. But secondly, I think the culture of sport in America is completely different from Europe. Tennis in Europe is probably top three. Soccer is number one, maybe cricket and some other things. But tennis is very high up on the totem pole for the public to love tennis. Okay. Mm-hmm. There are tremendous facilities in Europe, indoors and outdoors. And thirdly, I think that the way that television is, wrapped its arms around the team sports in America, I don't think you can ever fight that. Mm. Yeah. The team sports in Europe is basically soccer, Mm-hmm. So the culture is very different in America. So, you got NASCAR, which is also a sport. If you have a lot of money, you win. But, you got football, basketball, you got baseball, you got ice hockey. I mean, tennis is 7th or 8th on the totem pole in America. So I don't know how you will be able to entice, tennis is a very expensive sport versus soccer or basketball.
Right.
So it's a cost factor. And, it is sad to see tennis go through its gyrations in America in some instances, but obviously college tennis is also impacted very heavily. A lot of programs dropped from colleges, D1, D2. A very unfortunate situation, but yeah, I mean, I'm always a bit surprised that there wasn't more team tennis in a sense, like you got these club tennis things, but it's a cultural thing, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tennis has drastically changed over the last number of decades. I mean, when I lived in Austria, for instance, when we go to the club, even in that small town where I was living with my coach at his apartment, we would go to the tennis club and you would basically spend the whole weekend there. I mean, you eat there, you play doubles in the morning, you play singles, whatever. You're there all day.
Right.
In today's marketplace, it seems like people go to the tennis club and they play and they don't even shower there. They just go. They leave.
Yeah. Yeah. They go take a lesson, 2 hours, they're out.
Yeah, they're gone. It's not a destination per se like it was. Mm-hmm. And Europe's very different. Your club becomes a destination. Now, I'm not talking about gated community, fancy homes, fancy places, fancy clubs. Yeah, people will hang a little bit, but that's a completely different model. These are just, people just join a club and it's for the public and you can just go. And it's a real destination. People have fun events and they, I remember, burning the witches for winter and Austria and all these, really cool things during the seasons that you do at the club. And it was really a gathering point for the town and for people that are into tennis. And everybody knows tennis and it's a big part of their culture. But tennis is not a massive cultural thing in America. It's an elitist sport in a way, Mm-hmm. But it is truly a global sport. I just would like to see the map of Africa become a little bit more cluttered with some real stuff. And I think I'm on the path to get some done.
Okay. So you've got two young ones at play now, 10 and 12.
Yeah.
How is that experience? I've tried to raise my daughter to play, got 5 and 7-year-old boy, trying to get them to love it. They want to go to the tennis club and play basketball. You know what I mean? So they can stroke it though. They don't play that often, but the time they spend on the court is very sort of rigorous. So, They pick up the small racket in like perfect strokes. You know what I mean? So what's your experience like dealing with this new breed of tennis parent, right? Where their kid can do no wrong, looking for every advantage. Their kid, you know,
Yeah.
the ball was in. You know what I mean? When it was really
Oh,
out, you know what I mean? It's rough.
it's an experience. I honestly, what gives me a little bit more of a roadmap before I got to this point is the fact that I've had my tennis academy business now for almost 18 years.
Mhm.
So I've seen it all.
Mhm.
And nevertheless, it is very hard for a person like me who has been at that very high level to sit next to a tennis court and see the shenanigans going on. But it's not really unique to America. I mean, it's it's the same everywhere else. I mean, I hear the same stories in South Africa. I hear the same stories in England. The same with Tennis Australia. It's I guess it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But I really instill in my kids a sense of fair play, and we try to be. I mean, I've been where I could have pulled my hair out and I could have punched somebody, or it's just unbelievable. I mean, the cheating and stuff like that. But I just try and also know where we are, and it's these kids are 12 years old. They're not professional tennis players yet, and to chill and just to it's hard. It's hard because I'm hyper competitive. Let's put it that way. And I hate to see my kids hurt, but at the same time also they have to know that losing is going to happen a lot.
Mhm.
And only through losing do you actually learn more than when you win a lot. To win a lot in the 10s and 12s is almost a death wish.
Yes.
Very, very few of them come out of there and continue to win, because the kids that are working super hard are tiny little tots, and they work hard and they can take a punch, and they got the toughness and the mental toughness, and they fit and they're strong. They keep grinding, they keep fighting. Doesn't matter how many times they get knocked down, how many times they lose first round, how many times they lose in the finals. They could have tiebreakers and they lose all of them. Those are the ones that eventually make it.
Yeah.
It's not the ones that consistently win all the time that get to be the top.
Yeah.
And so it's a grind, and it's very expensive. I mean, we spend a lot of time with our kids. Even at my academy, they come and train quite a bit. And we try and expose them. It's a wonderful sport, and I just don't know exactly where it's going to end up, but it's a priority for us to give our kids the most utmost of advice and support and direction and guidance to do what they possibly could do, and they both are pretty good.
Well, one of the things that I do like about junior tennis, and I think that the parents will look back, even through the chaos of being a tennis parent, when you look back at how much time you were forced to spend with your kid.
Oh yeah.
In the car, on the plane, sharing a hotel room, watching lessons, pick up balls. That, I think, is that one-on-one time, right? That kid feels that investment in it. And I
Yep.
mean, that I think is one of the things that tennis does give that a team sport doesn't. I mean, I get so much joy out of seeing fathers spending time with their daughters,
Yeah.
pushing them to compete and letting them know that it's okay for a girl to compete and be mean and be nasty, right? You know what I mean? And so like to attach themselves to result. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I remember. That I know your tennis experience was a little different, but my parents didn't play tennis at all. My mother never saw me hit a tennis ball ever in my tennis career, right? But I do, I'm sure like being there for your kid, sharing a hotel room, being in the car, it's like a real treat and gives you a real chance in this day to actually shape your kid versus letting the iPad, the video game, the Instagram.
Oh yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with you. I think sport in general is the antithesis of these cell phones and these iPads. I mean, it is part of that technology is part of our world now. You just can't get away from it. But I just see, kids sitting, at a restaurant and nobody's talking to each other and they're all on their cell phone. Right? Absurd. You see people at a beautiful the Louvre, looking at paintings, and it's like they're on their cell phone sitting on a bench. It's just like horrendous. But it is part of the new world that we are in. And but yeah, I think sport is just extremely important for kids. I mean, and then tennis in particular is such a one-on-one self-reliance taught sport that makes you feel like you pull your hair out some days, and then you the next week you win something, or you win a match, or you play somebody that you never beat before. Now you beat them, and you feel that sense of satisfaction for your children and how they fought so hard, and now you've lost to a kid 5-6 times in a row, and now suddenly they start pushing them and then they win. It's just such a great feeling to see that sense of accomplishment, because it really is a one-on-one sport. It's probably one of the greatest life lessons that you can learn for yourself to be tough and self-reliant. It's the sport of tennis.
Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate your time. I know you're there with your kids at a tournament doing the tennis dad thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're sitting on your hands right during the match, right? Just trying to stay,
trying to be quiet.
Stay calm. But you're a legend in the game, and an ambassador for not only South Africa but all of tennis. And your name is infamous, right? When you think about the tennis legends from South Africa and pioneers. And I want to thank you for coming on the show, and wish you good luck in any way I can participate in the quest to bring tennis back to South Africa and the continent in general. Let me know. The reason why I actually started playing tennis was my dad took my brother's basketball team to Senegal.
No way.
West Africa.
Yeah.
And we came back to the States July 27th. All the summer camps were full in my neighborhood, except for tennis camp. Because no one in my neighborhood wanted to play tennis. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, low-income area. No one wanted to play tennis, right?
Right.
So my mom took me to the park. The instructor said it's $12 for the rest of the summer, and we have room. And she said, "Boy, get out the car." Yeah. So, lots of my tennis career started because of that long trip to Africa with my parents.
Amazing.
In the summer. So it's
amazing. Yeah.
Beautiful place. I love going there, and I appreciate you, brother.
Well, I tell you what, we are all just crazy about this sport. I've been playing tennis since I was 4 years old. I've never lost my want and desire to do it. Now coaching and seeing the fruits of my labor with kids, and putting kids in college even, and then kids that never played tennis before, or even a kid that was a volleyball champion tries and picks up tennis, starts to love it so much, got a full right D1 for tennis and volleyball. I mean, to hear those stories when you do that for kids over many years, I mean, it's just parents thanking you every year, writing you a Christmas note saying, she's doing so-and-so, she's now married, she still plays tennis, she's at the club. And just the game of tennis is such an influence on so many people on so many levels. It's not always just it's the glamour of the Shangri-La story of winning Wimbledon and winning that's one thing, and it's in itself some amazingly accomplished for many coaches. But just to change lives and be able to affect people's lives, I mean, that's the big thing. So that's really the goal for us. And I think we have some fantastic people, like I said, from the highest level of our sport, as well as sponsors and others that are iconic people in the world of so many business opportunities and so forth that want to see this happen for us. So it's we are getting going, and as soon as the dam will burst one of these days, and everybody will know what we're doing. So it's going to be very exciting, very, very exciting. I mean, it's a whole continent. I mean, it's not just one country, it's a whole continent that we want to awaken to tennis. I cannot be the only one that's ever won a Grand Slam twice. There should be many more Roger Federers and Serena Williams is coming out of Africa. Yeah. That's for sure. Yannick Noah's, all of these guys. And, North Africa is pretty much Franco-Africa, it's a bit more French. Yeah. So the French has a lot of influence there. And you had tennis tournaments in Tunisia, you got Egypt, you got Morocco. There's some others, but Sub-Saharan Africa has been left in the dust. So time for us to step up. And, people like myself, I'm very, very keen to do that. And spend a lot of time in South Africa as well. My kids can't wait for them to see where Dad came from. Look at a few lions and giraffes and elephants, and have some fun with that as well. But it's gonna be a pretty amazing opportunity.
Well, I can't let you go since we are Australian Open time, and that is, your place, right? 2-time champion there. Well, who's your pick for the Australian Open?
Well, I tell you what, Djokovic looks awfully strong. I think. He has a bone to pick.
He has a bone to pick.
He does have a bone to pick, and the way they treated him was quite disgusting in my opinion. But that's life. You get over it, you move on, and you do your best you can. And I think he has a bone to pick, and he's something to prove. And I think I think he's going to be definitely the greatest of all time because he's just one of those unique athletes that come along once in a lifetime. So I would pick Djokovic. Swiatek is a bit of a blip right now. She's starting to be hauled in by some of the girls, and Pegula beat up 2-2 yesterday. I saw that match, and
2-2.
Yeah, 2-2. I mean, Jessica, she practiced at Whitfield, where I work with this up and coming WTA player, and she practiced with this with Jessica Pegula and stuff. And Pegula looks good. You know, she played really well yesterday, so she could be a very much a dark horse in the tournament. So I would say Swiatek probably will gain a little bit more confidence and go to her next gear. Pegula just played her and didn't let her play her own game yesterday. She was Swiatek looked a little bit off, but that's tennis, right? But yeah, I saw Alcaraz got injured. He's not playing.
Yep.
What did he do? I didn't see.
I don't know the details on it yet, but I saw the blip that came across the screen. I said, "Oh, opportunity." I mean, I thought he was probably the one person that physically could match Djokovic.
Absolutely.
But with him gone, you know, and Rafa sort of, you know, maybe not being 100%, you know, Djokovic, he's definitely, and the extra, I mean, Djokovic is a player that doesn't really need any extra motivation, but when he has it, I mean, you know.
No, he's the greatest of all time. He'll surpass everybody with Grand Slams. I mean, he's got another 5 years of tennis in him. Yeah. You can imagine he just wins one of those 5. It's 5 already. I mean, he's at 25 Grand Slams. These other guys are at 121, 22. So, I mean, I would say he's probably going to be there. But, you know, other great guys is, you know, Ruud is always knocking. I think, what is the kid from Norway? Rune?
Yeah, Rune, Holger Rune. Yeah.
Holger could be making a move. He's a strong guy. But I tell you what, I like this French guy that played Djokovic yesterday in Auckland. Halis, tall guy. Djokovic beat him 7-6, 7-6. And I'm telling you, Djokovic had to play unbelievably good tennis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a point here and a point there that made the difference. But this guy's good. He's got a monster serve. I mean, he was serving constantly 118, 119, 120 second serves.
Mm-hmm.
And he could be a dark horse in the tournament as well. But I just love tennis. We have TVs on and it's just tennis everywhere. Every day is just tennis. So, but I appreciate the time. I really do. And don't be a stranger. Let's talk in the next couple of months and see where we are with Africa and see what we can do together.
All right, brother. Well, this has been a tennis.com podcast with the man, the myth, the legend, Johan Kriek.
The myth is good.
Yeah, the grass court Australian Open, right?
Yeah, that's fun. That was a good time.
Thank you for joining.
You're welcome, buddy. All the best. Good luck with everything.